Hey, Matt here. Happy 4th of July weekend. I'm going to do a video today on Michael Bloomfield, one of my favorite American 60s guitar players, blues guitar player, although I don't know if he was known as a rock guitar player in the 60s or not, but he was very influential in the scene. He was from Chicago and played with all the blues greats in that town before he joined the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, well, even before he, played with Dylan. He was particularly close to Muddy Waters. He came from a family that had money, so he was a trust fund kid, so he didn't have to work. But he was ambitious, to show he could cut everybody else, I guess, in his early days. So I'm going to start with 1965. I'm also going to touch upon the career of Al Kooper in this video because Al Kooper was closely linked with Michael Bloomfield in the 60s anyway. And I'm never going to do an Al Kooper show, so I must just put them together. So both Michael and Al play on Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited, the greatest American rock album of 1965. This is just an old SA CD. I've got this album, numerous times. But every guitar lick, every guitar fill, I should say, or lead, is played by Michael. Dylan, is just doing rhythm. It's one of the great albums of the 1960s. One of the great albums of all time. I showed this on my Dylan video, but if you're really a fanatic for mid-60s Dylan, this blue box here covers Bringing It All Back Home, Highway 61 Revisited, and Blonde on Blonde. Every session recorded for those 3 albums, and stuff like, Can You Please Crawl Out Your Window and Positively 4th Street. Anyway, so every lick that Michael played on the Highway 61 Revisited sessions is on this big box set. It's out of print. It's ridiculously expensive. So unless you're a fanatic, don't worry about it. So there you are, Michael and Al. Oh, the famous story is that, Al Kooper did not really play keyboards that much, but he kind of bluffed his way into the sessions for this album, especially for Like a Rolling Stone. He came there thinking he was going to play guitar, but when he got there, they said, well, we got a great guitar player. So he goes, I can play keyboard. It's in the Dylan movie, A Complete Unknown, that came out last year, so if you want to check that out. That same year, 1965, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. There's a audio fidelity. Is this Steve Hoffman or Kevin Gray? It's Kevin Gray. This is a great album. Of course, Paul Butterfield was a master harp player, harmonica player, and he had a great band. These guys were like playing blues tunes better than the Rolling Stones, only they couldn't come up with original material as good as the Stones. These guys were blues purists, at least at this time. Butterfield would later change, but since I'm never going to do a Paul Butterfield show, I might as well delve into these albums. He's got Elvin Bishop, another great guitar player, on here, but Mike plays all the leads. They relegated Elvin to rhythm or whatever, which must have pissed him off because Bishop was in the band before Michael was. Born in Chicago is a classic Paul Butterfield song. Shaker Moneymaker, Blues with a Feeling, Thank You Mr. Poobah, I Got My Mojo Working. Sam Lake could sound just like Muddy Waters, and he had played, I think, with Muddy Waters. He was the drummer. Mellow Down Easy, Screamin', that's a good one. Our Love Is Drifting, Mystery Train. Paul would continue to do that song well into the 70s. Last Night and Look Over Yonder's Wall. Yeah, this is as good a blues album probably as was released in 1965. Okay, 66, our boy does East West with the Butterfield Band. It is, I think, the superior of the 2 albums that Michael made with Paul Butterfield. This is a great record, one of the great American albums of 1966. Walking blues, get out my life, woman. I got my mind, I got a mind to give up living. All these blues, work song, Mary Mary, the Mike Nesmith tune, which Mike would later do with the Monkees, and Run DMC would sample. Two Trains Running, Never Say No, and the epic East-West title track, all 13 minutes and 10 seconds of it, where Mike was, introducing exotic Eastern modalities into a jamming blues song. Very experimental, but it completely works. It's psychedelic, which is not something that Michael was usually associated with, but he would be in the next year. Little sidebar here on Al Kooper. He was in a band called the Blues Project. This is their great album, Projections. This is an old CD, an old Verve CD. I got it decades ago. I Can't Keep From Crying is one of their best ever numbers, the Blues Project. Blues Project was a New York band. Steve's song, You Can't Catch Me, Two Trains Running. That's 11 and a half minutes. Wake Me, Shake Me. I think that they did that in Monterey, maybe. Oh yeah, Monterey, which I'll get to in a second. Cheryl's Going Home. Flute Thing is one of their better. They definitely did that one in the movie from Monterey. Craspy Baby and Fly Away. Tom Wilson produced it. If you've never, and also Marcus James, if you've never heard this album, but you think that you're like a 60s connoisseur, I suggest that you pick it up, or listen to it on Spotify if it's on Spotify. Yeah, great band that Al was in pre, Super Sessions or whatever. Okay, in 67, Michael starts a band called the Electric Flag. A bit of history. Now, this is a San Francisco band. Michael was a Chicagoan, obviously, but the Paul Butterfield band was very big in San Francisco, in Bill Graham's establishments especially. And so the whole band liked it there. But Michael liked it so much, he stayed there. That became his permanent. He stayed in the Bay Area for the rest of his life until he died in 1981, becoming, an honorary Bay Area musician, as associated with, San Francisco music as virtually anybody else anyway. He was like an elder figure to the guitar players there, even though in a Rolling Stone interview in the late 60s, he trashed the place. He trashed the musicians. He was just being stuck up, I guess, and later regretted that he said those things. But anyways, so the Electric Flag was a San Francisco band. Buddy Miles, the drummer who later worked with Hendrix and Band of Gypsies. Was Mark Natalan in the band? Yep. Nick Gravenitas, which I'll get to. Anyways, their first album in 67, they played the Monterey Pop Festival. They were one of the most anticipated bands to play there. And then Hendrix kind of stole their thunder, and Janis and Big Brother and whatever. But they did the soundtrack to one of my favorite hippie movies, The Trip, if you have an interest in counterculture films from the late 60s, I've already talked about this movie in my Steppenwolf video, but this was a movie written by Jack Nicholson about Peter Fonda tripping on acid. It's got Dennis Hopper in it, so it's one of those pre-Easy Rider movies, which had, Fonda, Hopper, and written by Nicholson in there, with a soundtrack by the Electric Flag. I don't have the album. It was released. There is a soundtrack to this movie, but I've heard it online. I like it. I recognize the music, from the movie, and it's psychedelic. It is the most psychedelic music that Michael Bloomfield ever did, who was not that kind of a hippie type guy. But he, took the gig because the band was getting on their feet by that time, and they needed the money, and, So anyways, that's the Electric Flag's first album. Okay, their real album, the only non-soundtrack album that Bloomfield ever did with the Electric Flag, is a long time coming. He spent more time on this album than any other project that he ever worked on. He was one of those kind of, go in the studio and just kind of bash it out kind of guys, but not on this album. By this time, he was being managed by Albert Grossman, Dylan's manager, Janis's manager. And Grossman gave him a lot of money to make this album. The album did not take off when it was finally released in 1968. It sold modestly. It's a good record. I like it. It's solid. Not a masterpiece. And Michael doesn't overplay. There's not a whole lot of epic guitar solos on here like you would expect, him to do. But they do Killin' Floor, the Howlin' Wolf number. Groovin' is Easy is one of their great tunes. Overlooking You, She Should Have Just, it's another one of their great songs. Wine, they did that at Monterey. Texas, Sitting in Circles, You Don't Realize, Another Country. Easy Rider, a song called Easy Rider before the movie, because that's an old blues idiom anyway, or a phrase. Sunny, Mystery, Look Into My Eyes, and Going Down Slow. Some of those are bonus tracks, by the way. It's a solid album, not as good as East West, but this represents the Electric Flag more than the soundtrack to the trip does. After this, since the album did not take off, Michael was really in debt to Albert Grossman and spent the years after this, well into the 1970s, having to do things financially for Grossman that Michael would not have chosen to do. Like Albert would call up Michael and say, I want you to do this for me. And Michael would do it because that would pay off some of the debt that he owed. Anyways, we're still in 68, right? Okay, so he hooks up with Al Kooper again for one of my favorite albums that either one of them ever did, Super Session. This is the old Sony Master Sound gold disc. I love this record. Al Kooper rented a house here in LA and he invited Michael down, and they were going to cut a whole album together of just jamming. Things were not really prepared in advance, although I'm sure Kooper had lots of ideas. And Michael comes down, he stays a day, gets insomnia, and goes back home. Now there's thoughts on that. Did he want to score drugs? Was he whatever? Why did he go home? Because Michael was a flake. That's pretty much it. So the next day, Al calls up Steve Stills, a guy he didn't even know, but he knew that Stills was a working musician, a good guitar player, was here in LA. He says, you want to make the rest of the album with me? And Steve says, sure. So side one is Michael, and it's Albert's Shuffle, Stop, and Man's Temptation, or then his Holy Modal Majesty, which is a masterpiece. And really, although I love Albert's Shuffle too, folks, Michael's playing on this record, on the first half of this album, is perhaps my favorite Bloomfield on record, and the title track of East West, and I guess all the stuff he did on the Dylan album. But this is virtually my favorite thing that Michael ever did. So Steve is on side two, Takes Out to Laugh, Takes a Train to Cry. That's the Dylan number. They do that one well. Season of the Witch was one of the big numbers, the Donovan tune. And Michael did not like later in his concerts, people would ask him to play that, not knowing Stephen Stills plays on that, not Bloomfield. You Don't Love Me, the old blues tune, and Harvey's tune, Harvey Brooks. I think it's a great album. It's like a masterpiece. Here is the album in surround sound. Is this 5.1? I don't know if this is quad or 5.1, but it's good. It sounds good. I like it. Okay, so we're still in 68, right? What's Al Kooper doing after Super Session? He forms, actually, he probably did Blood, Sweat, and Tears before the Super Sessions album. This is the first Blood, Sweat, and Tears album. Michael's got nothing to do with this record, but it's a masterpiece. Blood, Sweat, and Tears was a horn-driven rock band before Chicago. They released two great albums in 1968 before Chicago even released one. This is the Al Kooper-led version. A lot of critics will say this is the better album of the two. I don't have a horse in that race. I love this album. I love the next one too. Here is the here's the audio fidelity version in surround sound. Guys, this really is a masterpiece. Let me see if I can read these titles to you. Overture. Oh, you know what? I can't read them, so I'm not gonna even try. But if you like 60s music, you'll like that. Then they kick Al out of the band. His ego's too big, whatever. They get David Clayton Thomas in. They make another masterpiece. Blood, Sweat, and Tears comes out in late 1968. This is where all the hits come from. This is the album that they're probably the most remembered for. This one I can read easily. Variations on a Theme by Eric Satie. Smiling Faces, the Traffic tune. Sometimes in Winter, a beautiful number. More and More. And When I Die is a hit. God Bless the Child. Spinning Wheels a hit. You Made Me So Very Happy is a hit. Blues Part 2, almost 20 minutes of it. And then another Variations on a Theme by Eric Satie. It's another masterpiece. And here's the surround sound disc of that. All right, that's just my little side trek into Al Kooper. Mike has nothing to do with those Blood, Sweat, and Tears albums. In 1969, Al decides he wants to do a live version of Super Sessions. He wants to go to San Francisco. He wants to get Michael to come down. He wants to get San Francisco musicians to do it live. This is the live adventures of Mike Bloomfield and Al Kooper. That's Al. This is Mike. This is a Norman Rockwell painted album cover. It's pretty good. You see this poster here? There is an original 1969 poster for those 3 nights. Where was it? It was one of Bill Graham's things, right? Bill Graham Presents in San Francisco. Mike Bloomfield, Al Kooper, and Friends. It's a Beautiful Day. The Loading Zone. Anyway, that's a cheap poster too. Oh, and you know what? I should have showed you this earlier. There's a first printing of a Paul Butterfield band poster from '67. I think it's '67. While Mike was still in the band before he left to join the Electric Flag. This is also this is a Wes Wilson poster. It's at the Fillmore. That's also a cheap poster. All right, so there's my 3 Bloomfield related posters. These shows went well. Michael did not stay for the whole thing either. He bailed on Al all over again, claiming insomnia or whatever. Steve Miller played, but he's not on the album. Carlos Santana is on this album. This was released in January of '69, so I think this is Carlos's first time on vinyl, maybe. He's on the song called Sonny Boy Williamson, which Jack Bruce co-wrote. It's good. Mike Bloomfield sings a number on here. It's not as good as the studio Super Session album, but I like it. This came out in '69. '69 was a big year for Michael. He did a lot of things. This is his solo album. It's Not Killing Me. This is this is a Japanese one. There's the Obi. This album, because it is a solo Mike Bloomfield record, I wish it was better. First of all, he doesn't dazzle on the guitar on this record. It's rather understated. It's Not Killing Me. I can't hardly recommend this to you, but it is the only album Mike made under his own name in the 60s. He would make more later on. It perhaps is his most well-known, but by this point, I think he was getting a little bit burned out, especially considering the workload that he would be taking on in '69. All right. Here's an album that I do like. It's just called Live at Bill Graham's Fillmore West. It's got Mike on the cover. It's got Snooki down there. And is that Nick Ravnius? I don't know. I think Mark Naftalin's on here too. But there's the back. It's a really solid record. It's live, and Bloomfield just smokes on these tracks. Yeah, this is a CDR. I downloaded it online. So this is I recommend this one way more than just his solo album. From those same shows, Nick Gravnitis, the singer in Electric Flag, the fellow Chicagoan, Nick the Greek, he did his album, My Labors, which has got studio tracks and it's got, live tracks from those Fillmore shows. Quicksilver backs him on the some of the studio stuff. And again, Mike is smoking on the live stuff. So this is this Nick Gradenius album, My Labors, is a great companion piece to this album, which is just called Live at Bill Graham's Fillmore West. Get these albums if you're a Michael fan and you want to hear him just rip it up on guitar in a live setting. One of the last things he did that year was also in Chicago, where he was from. He did this Muddy Waters album called Fathers and Sons. Otis Spann is on here. Paul Butterfield is on here. It was a double album. And it's another CDR. It's much like the Nick Gradenius album. It's got some studio stuff. It's got some live stuff. The live stuff is better. I'm not a huge fan of this record. There are better Muddy Waters albums on the Chess label, but it was nice to see, Michael do something for his mentor, Muddy Waters. Again, I think this is another one of these projects that were forced on him by Albert Grossman. Though, as we're winding down the '60s, what else can I tell you? He had a hand in helping Janis form her band, the Cosmic Blues Band, on her 1969 album, I Got Them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama. He also plays on a track or two. You can look it up on Wikipedia, what they are. It can only be one. He's also with Al Kooper on the Moby Grape Jam album, which was the second half of Wow, when in the original double LP. But it's debatable what Michael's playing on there, so I didn't show you that. If you're interested in Paul Butterfield, I recommend this. This has all of his albums up through sometime in the 70s, I think. The Paul Butterfield Blues Band did not remain a blues band for a long time after Michael left. I do like this one with Elvin Bishop, The Resurrection of Pigboy Crabshaw. But by '69, by the time they played Woodstock, these albums, the band is becoming just like a kind of a standard kind of R&B bluesy band. And by the time of like their live album, which I know a lot of people like, they are just like an R&B kind of soul band. It's like Paul playing with a whole bunch of African-American musicians. But, they were relatively well known in the 60s. They did not have a career like, say, John Mayall did. But, I like them. This is the only Michael Bloomfield box set that I know. I like it, but it just covers the already well-trodden territory of the 1960s. What I would like to have would be some kind of multi-artist box set of Michael's 70s work, because he did a lot of stuff in the 70s. He did albums on his own. He did albums with other people. He made soundtracks to movies, some of them pornographic. He had a blues album, which is supposed to be good, that I've never heard, which you had to send away for in a guitar magazine. I'd like to have a good cross-sampling of that stuff. In 1980, before he died, he played at a Bob Dylan show in San Francisco. You can make a lot of interesting choices in compiling a Bloomfield box set after 1969. But this is fine. First, it even has a DVD. By far, the best, the only book I really know is Michael Bloomfield's Life in the Blues. It's called Guitar King by David Dan. I read it with that coffee stain or whatever it is. Dan talks to like virtually everyone that Michael ever knew. You really get a feel for Michael. He did become a bit lazier in the 70s. Like I said, he wasn't as ambitious. He was living off of his parents, or his dad like owned restaurants or something like that, and or made items for restaurants, something like that. And he didn't have to work, and he could sit there and he could just chip away, at his drugs, and play the occasional gig at clubs and stuff. and have people come visit him, and that's what he did, you know, and while also making music. But Michael was a bit intimidated, I think, in the 60s by other hot shot guitar players. Hendrix did for sure intimidate Michael. I don't think he would even be on stage with Hendrix. He was fans of like Clapton or a fan of Clapton and Jeff Beck, but I don't think he played with those two guys too much either. You know, he could be rather insecure, but that's too bad because I thought he was just fantastic. So I think that's it. You know, Al Kooper had a long career after that. Al Kooper produced the first 3 Leonard Skinner records. He wrote This Diamond Ring in the 60s for Gary Lewis and the Playboys. I had that book, Backstage Passes. Anyway, that's my video on Mike Bloomfield. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time.